But I guess you've been to probably even more events than I don't know. Have you got a take on construction events generally, and then probably leading to the question of like, does anyone do it well?
They very much feel like Groundhog Day. Every time you go, it's the same people with the same stand doing the same pitch. And ultimately, these vendors are here just to remind everyone they exist and hoping people fall into their sales funnel because they're going to get a footfall. But it's construction's incestuous, so you've got the same crowd of people with a different company each time. They're looking at the same companies.
Sorry, you just had me at incestuous. I was
Yeah.
not literally, figuratively.
Yeah, figuratively.
Yep.
So it feels like it's just this rinse and repeat model of like uninspiring. We still exist. Here's a demo, and try and get some sort of footfall and give them a pencil or a mug. So
Yep.
it's all quite depressing.
This is such a British intro. Welcome back to the Offsite Podcast, episode 89. I am Jason Lancini and joined once again by Carlos Cavallo. Today, we are talking about a massive $28 million raise from an early stage Middle Eastern construction technology company called WakeCap. Next, we will ask ourselves, if we're going to run a construction event, which we might do, how would we make it good? AKA construction events, you bad, why? And then finally, we're going to review and discuss a post from the community, construction technology community, saying that basically finding a niche is the best way into the construction market. Don't go mass market first. Carlos, together in person in London. It's nice. How are you, mate?
Yeah, well, good, thanks. All good. It's nice to have a bit of a tan from our trip to Vietnam with a camera. But
is that why you spent half an hour setting that high fidelity? If anyone's seeing our two cameras side by side, I look like I'm being filmed through a shower window. And Carlos looks like he's got James Cameron doing.
There's a ring light in the office. I'll bring that out next time.
For you or for me?
Yeah, you probably need it more.
It looks like I'm the producer and you're doing a one-person show. No, it's good to see you. I flew into London yesterday after we had a week in Vietnam. No stories there. Nothing happened.
Totally normal work days. Yeah, very good fun. Yeah, very cool moment to see 45-ish people come together, largely remote, for the first time. So yeah,
and different
awesome.
People's karaoke skills. People on a spectrum.
Yeah.
I'm at one end. The low end, others at the opposite.
And there's JP,
yeah.
Some serious talent in the team that was uncovered.
Before we dive into topic one, I feel compelled to read this. I don't normally sit on the Autodesk user forums and read them all day, but I thought this one was worth reading out loud. Dear Autodesk team, I'm writing to express my profound disappointment and disgust with your recent commercial that mocks God. As a long-time user of your software, I've always valued your company's innovation and contributions to the design industry. However, the advertisement crosses a serious line and shows a lack of respect that is both offensive and unacceptable. Your marketing team's decision to produce such content is not only misguided, but also alienates loyal customers like myself. And it goes on. And the subject line is concern regarding recent Autodesk commercial. So this relates to an ad campaign that Autodesk recently produced, which pictures themselves as somehow, I don't know, some have said like an equivalent to God or God. I probably wouldn't go so far. Basic idea is that God has less work to do in creating stuff because Autodesk has kind of done a bunch of it. True? Not true? What do you think, Carlos? Is that your letter?
I think it's a slight overreaction. Trigger levels are pretty low these days, but the thing that I was nicely surprised about, to put a positive spin, was like an actual marketing effort for a construction tool. Like it was a real advert that you would see for like a Google,
like a real company,
like a real company. Yeah. So to see professional marketing in construction for arguably the first time, which may or may not have.
It might be the first and last time. Yeah,
it was nice to see it. Like it was legitimate. Yeah, I think overreaction to an extent. Most major marketing campaigns trigger some people. in some way.
What do you think that I think like anyone in the industry that is a potential customer probably knows of Autodesk? So what do you think the like why mass market to the broader world?
Yeah, well, it could be the start of like almost a rebrand. It's the same as like why advertise Coca-Cola. Maybe it's the start of maybe they're going for more mass market products. Maybe they're going to do something slightly differently because they in that advert
They're going to
they
release
push
their
the
own Coke.
engineer like the non-construction engineering side, manufacturing and everything else. And I don't know how big they were in that space, but it was quite obvious that that was like almost equal balance to construction.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, wonder if they're going to diversify a bit.
You don't think it's fending off competition?
It could be, or maybe the marketing team just had a great idea and thought they'd throw some money at it.
Yeah,
and then maybe missed the bar on a few notes. But we'll see.
Well, let's dive into topic one. So WakeCap, which is a Saudi-based construction tech company, just closed a Series A at I think the Saudi US basically timed around the Saudi US investment forum. It is a company that those outside of the Middle East may not have heard of, but has got a solid presence in that like giga project being the new term for mega projects. It came on radar a number of years ago. It purchased a Silicon Valley startup called Cruise by Core back in 2020, mid 2024. I think we talked about it on the podcast at the time. And yeah, with this new round of investment, it's definitely not short of money. The company itself does workforce tracking of productivity and safety and progress. So for me, I kind of categorize it as almost like cost tracking and labor tracking and productivity. It is a player in a market that is definitely highly competitive, and probably they're unique in their approach to solving this problem of tracking of these costs through their use of helmet wearable sensors. So it's a kind of smart hard hat as the idea. So all sorts of things like obviously the Saudi and Middle Eastern market is very large, especially if they're targeting giga projects, but it isn't endless. And you know how viable is tracking devices in other markets where maybe labor laws might make it less feasible. So yeah, I think as a starting point, I don't know if you have thoughts on this market of productivity and labor tracking and how this solution fits into the sort of mosaic.
The tracking of labor isn't new, but the tracking of behaviors, movements, and productivity is new on site. So it's in that horrible gray area at the moment where people feel a bit uncomfortable because they're trying to work out, is it invasive?
Mm-hmm.
Is it fair game?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're employing people, you want productivity at the back end. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops. There's also a ton of ways that you can do it. So it'll be interesting to see who wins the race on what's the best way to actually track people.
Yeah.
Because we're seeing helmets, we're seeing attachment to clothing, we're seeing cameras, we're seeing drones, all sorts.
Yeah, even just an app on a phone.
Exactly, yeah. That makes the most sense because there's no hardware. Yeah, from the...
Unfortunately, it's already been done, so we can't steal that over.
Yeah. Specifically with WakeCap, they've been doubling revenue pretty well for the last few years. But it'll be interesting to see how much of that was like the Saudi Vision projects wave. They've been
those projects have a uniquely big pain point, right? Like they have tens of thousands of people on their sites coming from countries all over the world. The sites are very, very, very spread out. Yeah. They need to track where the hell they are at any point in time. You could have 200 people hiding, like, you know, and it wouldn't be
2,000.
Yeah, like it would be, it'd be a uniquely complicated challenge. And that's why you could see how a company that solves some of that problem can suddenly be tracking hundreds of thousands of people very quickly. Yeah, there's all sorts of interesting questions that come off of like, how does their go-to-market strategy change when you're not dealing with projects with 40,000 people on site?
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, I think their raise was around geographic expansion. Be interesting to see how much traction they get in that space because they're leaving the mega project in the space with almost no rules.
Yep.
to like super stringent
Yep.
across Europe, US, and a lot of Asia. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can maintain that growth rate.
To push you to like maybe see what you think. Like maybe if I frame the conversation, the way I look at this space is like construction has two things it needs to track: progress and cost, because then they're the basic components of like earned value. And I think there's a big market of technology that is attacking progress tracking, and it starts with reality capture, like open space, like build dots, etc., where once you capture the progress of the project, you can start to automatically identify the progress of the project, and that gives you that's a pathway you can get to progress capture. Then on the flip side, you've got cost, and the cost components are basically labor, plant, materials, and so notoriously much harder to keep track of, I think, than the building which stands still and doesn't hide in containers or sneak off site. And so the historical way to do this would be, like tracking sheets and day worksheets and paperwork to track it.
Turnstiles, maybe.
Yeah, turnstiles as well, which works in certain circumstances. And so there is a market of tools tackling bits of this, like tracking. So maybe some focusing on plant, some focusing on labor, some focusing on bits of labor. So these guys are in the space. In the UK, things like Index. I know, we heard at the Procore forum that they're pushing into a similar area. In places like we saw in Australia recently, One Breadcrumb brought Sign on Site, which is a similar thing. So there's lots of approaches and tools in the space, and then there's other tools like I think called Track Unit is an example that tracks pieces of equipment. First of all, do you believe that these things become automatically tracked in the future? And then the follow-up question is like, what do you think the most likely technology stack is that gets you there?
Yes, we have. Like, I can't see a future where it's not being tracked. The tracking itself gets really difficult because, like, not just who owns that data, but you have conflicting use of that data. You've got clients that will basically want to see, am I spending my money in the right way? Like, is it defined and non-fraudulent cost? You've got contractors that don't want the client to be necessarily seeing information because they're protecting their own margin, but they want to be able to track subcontractors to pull costs from them. You've got subcontractors that don't really want any of this being measured because they're going to be called out for poor performance, even if that data is available. And then the individuals, you're then, you can end up in a spot where people are like worried for jobs, working harder, putting themselves into potentially dangerous situations. But you can imagine other crowds going, look at my productivity rate on my CV. I want a higher rate because I can deliver more for the project. So the data gets into this weird spot. From the technology side, I don't think there's a standout at the moment. You don't want hardware attached, really. From a cost perspective, whichever company actually nails in that space, imagine the maintenance costs and keeping everything up to date and software changes with hardware. So that one you want to avoid. Mobile phones difficult because people will say, well, that's my personal mobile phone. They're not giving labor force mobile phones. Mm-hmm. That's not going to happen. So they'll just probably say no. And you'd imagine that unions would back that sort of stance. Yeah, there's lots of people trying to work on cameras where it can track people, plant, materials.
That's surely the most capital intensive because...
But yeah, and the coverage, I've had a few conversations. It's really hard to get full coverage on a site without spending a lot of money on kit. And that kit goes out of date every 3 years.
And the site changes. A wall goes up and suddenly all the cameras have to move.
Yeah. I don't have a good idea in terms of where I think it should go or what the right thing is. If it could be indirectly done through other apps that you do need on your phone. And then maybe that would be a way of doing it, which isn't, hey, can you download this app and so we can track what you're doing? But it's a difficult one.
Yeah, you could see a spot where like it's a wearable, and you could see a spot where it's an app. And if I was to play out how either of them could progress, you could imagine on the wearable side that a wearable that enables you to do your job is the gateway to do the tracking. So like a XYZ reality headset where you can go in there and it tells you where to build, what to build. And then suddenly it's also tracking how many hours you work, what your, all that sort of stuff, safety things. So I could see a path where I think it's probably in a lot of markets that are have strong labor laws, just a wearable for tracking probably is a tough sell.
But you could have something like, I don't know, you could have a little wristband which is access to site. It's how you swipe in instead of biometrics or a card, for example.
But how do you know it's you wearing the wristband?
Yeah, you don't.
Because I think
but then how do you know if it's you wearing the helmet?
Well, retina scan or something, right? That's what the Apple Vision Pro does. But this touches actually on the second path I could see, which is it's an app-based thing.
Yeah.
That is where the feedback, because you have to have like a give to get, basically. So I give you benefit of you can do your job through this headset and blah, 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 blah. And then as a result, I'm able to collect this data. That's the XYZ reality type of path. The other give to get is like, here's an app where it'll automatically track your hours, submit your timesheet. There's an automatic approval of pay, but
you could have incentives for
you're timing into this app. You're going, I'm on site, because in order to use the phone, you have to unlock your phone, biometric. It knows it's you. So I can see a path where an app has built this like labor cost tracking tied to invoicing thing. Probably also gameable. You close the app during the day and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I can see a path where it's like, yeah, there's a cost management, financials, automation, docketing thing that also tracks people's hours. And I can see a path where some piece of hardware is actually valuable to people on site, that they need it to do the job, and that thing has the ability to track productivity.
Yeah.
But just carry this dongle around. Don't ask me why.
Yeah.
Probably
pretty quickly.
Probably, but it keeps you safe.
Yeah.
How? No more questions, please. These are not the droids you're looking for.
Yeah, it's difficult. But also using that information as well. People are probably less worried if it's, yes, it proves you're on site to pay you, but if it's detached from actual performance. Because as soon as you start saying you're not laying this many bricks per shift, that's when you get into these weird rules that we're seeing emerge in Europe at the moment. So, for example, tracking when people come to the office with like working from home, you're not allowed to use that information on an individual basis because it's an invasive, you're invading their privacy. But you can take the group information and go, not enough people are coming to the office. So up your game. So it's kind of that aggregation. You can sort of use it generically, but not personally.
But that's where like I could see the app path of like it's your timesheet to get paid. Like you get paid per hour.
People do anything for money.
Yeah, so it's like we have to know your individual hours because we have to pay you accurately.
You could have mechanisms with incentives tied to that then.
Work more hours, get more pay.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think of something that doesn't end up being unsafe, but like if it was actually tracking output, if higher output individuals could get paid more.
Yeah, well, that's the Amazon warehouse thing. It's like, but I think I don't see this tracking output because I think that's another leap.
Just validating they're there.
Yeah, because to know output, you're solving both of those problems. I kind of set up this idea of tracking costs and tracking progress. They're both very technologically complicated. I don't see the people that do the cost tracking also nailing the progress tracking. Like XYZ Reality is trying to do both, but it's a lot. Yeah, it's very hard to do one thing well. It's extremely, extremely hard to do 7.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that the reality capture people get to progress tracking faster. Just simply saying who was on site, where were they working, what area, how often were they active? Like if you're tracking equipment, like there's a concept of utilization factors. So how often is it working versus idling? You could imagine that kind of metric being applied to people.
Yeah, yeah. I remember on jobs when people would be swiping in for 16 hours a day.
Do they take it to the toilet? That's where the app thing's good. You can start like,
alarm goes off. You've been scrolling for 15 minutes. Get up.
No, yeah, not like tracking what you're on, but you would be literally geolocated in the toilet. You spent in your last week. It's like screen time for work, because that's what the phone's doing, that thing in the back.
I remember on Crossrail they had to put turnstiles onto the canteen because people were just swiping in and having like a 3-hour breakfast at like 6 in the morning and things like that. So that I can see why it's a big issue.
It would be, in certain markets, no matter what you do, it's going to be very, very, very politically sensitive.
Yeah.
But no, it's interesting to see how they progress. It's a very competitive space, but also a big problem to solve. So with big problems will come lots of people trying to solve it with differing approaches. Yeah, I think that's watch this space.
Yeah.
Moving on. this discussion topic, which we brought up the other day. I think we talked about it in a previous episode, which is not everyone's the biggest fan of construction events.
Unless you like branded mugs.
As a former engineer, the idea of pitching that I should take a day off to go and to an event, I didn't even think I had the stomach or a set to do it.
You'll be suddenly given a lot of work if you ask to do that.
Yeah. Oh,
you're
you
not
actually
busy.
have a shitload of free time. Okay. There's obviously a whole perception thing about going to events that is probably, it's not unique to construction, but it's definitely in the category of industries where it's more frowned upon than, say, marketing people. But who knows what marketing people do anyway all day. And those that do go, and we've obviously been to a whole bunch of them, find that there's a couple of ways they can go. They can become a glorified sales pitch, where a common model for these folks is to sell vendor spaces, whether it's advertisers, stalls, etc. And a large percentage of the money comes from the vendors. When the business model outweighs the goal or the industry benefit, because there's a business behind running these events, when the business model and the drive to make more money overtakes the ultimate goal of the getting of people together anyway, you see them sell more and more and more vendor spaces. They start selling these packages where you get speaking slots, or you might host panels, and suddenly everywhere in every piece of content it's an ad, and there's very little discussion of anything that's of real use. So that's a big wind up. But I guess you've been to probably even more events than I don't know. Have you got a take on construction events generally, and then probably leading to the question of does anyone do it well?
They very much feel like Groundhog Day. Every time you go, it's the same people with the same stand doing the same pitch. And ultimately, these vendors are here just to remind everyone they exist and hoping people fall into their sales funnel because they're going to get a footfall. But construction's incestuous, so you've got the same crowd of people with a different company each time. They're looking at the same companies.
Sorry, you just had me at incestuous. I was
Yeah.
not literally, figuratively.
Yeah, figuratively.
Yep.
So it feels like it's just this rinse and repeat model of uninspiring. We still exist. Here's a demo, and try and get some sort of foot forward and give them a pencil or a mug. So
Yep.
It's all quite depressing.
This is such a British intro.
And it's also super expensive. Startups are rinsing cash at these things for probably little return. I reckon the first time we did one, I reckon we got a couple of leads, and one of them actually came through.
You can easily at a entry point, for people that don't know, entry point depends on the size of the event, but you could easily say £5,000, £10,000 entry point, and easily go up to 50,000.
Yeah, and then the big guys spend loads of money. But
if you do headline, it's almost like they don't have enough places to put their money, so you can charge whatever you want.
So they do it because they can, not because they necessarily sit as a high value event, and they still want to have their name at the top of the list. They're poor. We don't do many. If we do, we try and do them slightly differently, thinking through what we would do differently.
But maybe not as a vendor going.
No, hosting.
But say you weren't working, didn't have a full-time job. And you're I need to bring together a construction event that is actually good. Well, what would you define as actually good, and then what would you do?
Actually getting value. And I don't mean you see another tool, you get value. So going to these events should have a benefit to warrant you missing a day of work. So you don't even see things like, if you sign up today, you get a discount for the project from using this tool that you wouldn't get speaking to the salesperson on a normal meeting. Mm-hmm. So it's actually monetary incentivization to actually go, see, speak, and sign up. So, and that's just one example, but how do you actually incentivize attendance rather than just rely on everyone with a stand getting their network to come and everyone else benefits from the footfall? Every time you sit down and watch a presentation, it's a PowerPoint deck with bullet points. You should publish rules and say, look, none of you could do any of these things to stop the standard. Here's a case study, and here's 6 reasons why the case study was good, and talking through something that's pretty dry. And again, the people watching are either customers or vendors wanting to work with the person speaking, not because they're getting value from the presentation itself. So they need to up their game on the content that you're seeing. We need to actually make it worthwhile to go there. Why go? Why go there when you could just drop someone a call and probably get more time in a Teams in an hour on Teams than being there in person? And yeah, these stands themselves. No one should ever have a table with a cloth on it and a magnetic banner behind. That isn't a startup with a little bit of cash.
So
So
yeah,
yeah,
what would your event be?
I would definitely.
Like pitch me. It's a shitty Shark Tank.
I'd have a combination of like presentations or talks. There should be a competitive element to get in the door, not secure a spot and turn up with whatever you want on the day, because that'll incentivize people to actually think about something compelling. I would have exhibitors, but I would try to set some sort of bar and have rules. And again, you're pitching for space, not just selling spots to the highest bidder. I'd probably add elements of competition into the space. Like you could be running competitions in real time. You could be doing something where the attendees are seeing how impressive these teams or apps are in real time, not just getting a sales pitch from someone that's trying to sell a subscription.
Yep.
So it should feel like this super high energy competitive landscape that you go away actually feeling like, oh shit, we could really level up our game here, rather than going in and seeing Oracle, Procore, a couple of other tools that you see every year, and it's just the same thing, and it's people are just there for the free beer.
Yeah. So I think for me, the thing that I see at these events is like, well, there's like probably three things that I'd look to improve. First of all, the idea of having this event once a year, every year, where the same group of people come together, they have a kind of like almost a whinge about the same problems. Um, talk about it in this like one-to-many fashion of like here, let me tell you about all the problems your projects have, and then that happens over a day or two. It's like, see you next year. Hopefully we've fixed some of these problems.
Yeah.
And then like then the whole thing is just wrapped in a big sales pitch, or advertising. I would get rid of one-to-many presentations. I think, like we do with when we bring our team together in an offsite, I would be doing pick a problem, do team workshops to tackle the problem, present back like tangible things. Like, here's a specific problem that most projects have. Let's do little groups of whatever. Many of them, they come up with a solution to problem. They share it with other teams. They maybe present back to the group. So this kind of like tangible thing. And you might even make the conference smaller, but do them on like a roadshow around a country or a region, which also means that you can get them out of being annually, and you could do them every quarter, for example, so that you give more and more people exposure. Because once you drop the vendor stuff down, you lose money because there's less sponsors. But if you if you can access, instead of the same set of innovation managers or whatever that turn up that don't really run projects, sorry, innovation managers, but like the goal of this event should be to access the set of people that don't actually come to these events.
Yeah,
the people on projects.
You'll actually get a different.
Yeah, you move around, you do them quarterly, and you do them focusing like the majority of the content focus on tangible problems that people can try and solve. I think that would create a totally separate, different type of event, where people are walking away with something that they can go implement or test. You would probably be able to increase drastically the amount of attendees. And then, maybe you have fewer sponsors, but people are almost like patrons of this type of thing. So fewer people, but they may be paying more money to be the primary, sponsor or facilitator. They're actually making that it positions them, instead of like, I'm advertising to you, to like, I'm giving back to the industry by sponsoring this type of thing. Would you go? Would you invest?
I'd definitely go. I'm not sure about invest. No, I think that could work really well because it adds an educational element. No one goes away from an exhibit like actually learning something. They don't uncover a tool, but they don't learn how to.
Yeah, and then like a little stress ball they get or something.
Yeah, maybe a pen. So that would be like a high value add, which would be worth your time. The struggle with construction is probably getting people to go in the first place, and if they haven't experienced it before.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to have that with any event. And as a business model, you've actually not got this lumpy 1 year bit of revenue that you've got to work with.
Yeah, and you could start to even sell like subscriptions to the construction companies as well, where they could send so many people per year to the different events in different country in like regions. So you suddenly get into like a subscription revenue.
Franchise it out to each region.
Maybe. Righto, that's an idea. If someone wants more tips on that event, contact us.
We will see you at Project Controls X in November.
Oh, the inbox is empty. All right, final topic because we're going to run out of time here. So, there was a conversation that we had about a LinkedIn post, which I'll read the gist of as a primer, and then get your thoughts on. Yeah, maybe go straight to you on thoughts on like what's being said. So on LinkedIn, a chap wrote, "My thoughts on winning in contact. One size fits all will never happen in construction tech. The industry is too fragmented. Effectively, the market," that's me doing inverted commas, "is a federation of standalone businesses, each division or project with its own P&L, tech stack, and decision-making rituals. Stop chasing mass market. Instead, subsegment ruthlessly until there is a blue ocean or a blue lake, a space where the pain is evident, the alternatives are weak, and the path to value is obvious and quick for the decision maker." It goes on, but that's the gist of it, which is start in the smallest possible, in the biggest possible niche where the problem is really evident, basically subsegment down. Thoughts?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's practical. It's a starting point that you can actually tackle and grow from. Construction is messy. It's really hard to find a one size fits all. That niche can be carved in different ways. It could be a type of role or a type of problem that you're serving. So yeah, it's a sensible perspective. You don't want to carve a niche so small that the market's then too small, so it's not worth the time, and you're not going to get.
I think. Well, let's push this to the extreme. Like I think he is arguing to do that. He uses the terminology instead: subsegment ruthlessly until there is a blue ocean. A blue ocean is it's it's like a concept of a market where there's low competition. But then he says blue ocean or blue lake, indicating a lake is smaller than an ocean, right? Let's say you take the argument to the limit, and maybe they are arguing to subsegment down to a spot where that first initial segment is not a attractively large market. Would you agree with that extent of it?
I think it depends on the size of companies that you're actually targeting within that. Like if you think about every tier one contractor we speak to are trying to reduce the set of apps that they have. And if you go too niche, then if they actually do the math, you're going to end up with thousands of tools across the board to be able to do anything well. Also, if you go that niche and it's that hopefully simple, as soon as someone establishes that spot, then you're really open for someone to come along and be the second product.
Because I don't think he's arguing for a simple problem. I think he's arguing for a hard problem, but one that, because he talks about the pain is really evident, alternatives are weak.
But if you're going that niche, surely the problem won't be that big in theory. Like it could be a big problem.
You could have a big problem that's expensive for a small number of people.
Yeah. It's hard to. I guess it depends on like what is your goal or objective.
Well, let's say the goal is to make a lot of money.
Yeah, then you're in a difficult spot. Because unless you can charge a huge premium on it because of the scarcity of the requirement. But yeah, getting contractors to pay a lot of money for something like that, we know is difficult.
I disagree with you. I agree with the author. I think that starting with that sub niche is the entry point. It gives you your beachhead. When you start working with customers, Jason Lemkin from SaaSta always talks about like, if you listen to your customers, they'll show you the path from like whatever is 1 to 100 million in annual recurring revenue. So I totally agree. I think starting with the most evident pain in the smallest number of people lets you try and win that segment. But you have to know always that ultimately the goal of the company is to keep expanding the segments and growing out of that niche. It's the starting point. Because otherwise you start with a very broad market and you hear so many different things from your customers because they're all different to each other.
Yeah, end up too generic.
You end up making a product that suits no problem. So I totally agree. I think that's the only way forward.
But it works on the basis that then can be a springboard to grow and to broaden the niche once you've solved that initial pain.
Yeah.
You
So,
can
but
box yourself in quite badly in
yeah,
the
I
wrong
think you need to
pain.
have a thesis. Like, in our approach, for us, there is this path to, like, for example, adjacent problems for the same customer. So you can expand the product to solve that. But I think you could have a different company that basically, I don't know, let's say you've got a problem that, I don't know, electricians have a problem with, and you really subsegment down to electricians that are single person companies. I'm just using a hypothetical scenario. You might know that, like, plumbers, single person plumber companies have a very similar problem. And so you expand the category in that way. But trying to do, I don't know, single person trades might be too broad as a starting point. So I would always agree, like, pick the like tightest possible niche first and try to win that. But yeah, you've got to be really good on your timing on like when to expand and when to not.
Yep.
Because otherwise you hit these like, well, you run out of potential customers until you can keep expanding the moat.
And if you need to raise money, your total addressable market.
Yeah. If you're on the VC, if you're on the VC, totally. If you're on the VC hype wheel, that train, you have to do. Yeah, you have to do it in a real aggressive way.
Really convincing in your growth plan.
Yeah, totally. Because you'll have to you'll keep being pushed to expand the TAM or the addressable market, maybe even before you're ready to, based on where your product is at.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, +1 for no VC.
Yeah, just use your own money and then you're fine. Awesome. Right. I think that's time. So thank you very much, everyone, for tuning into today's show. If you did enjoy the episode, please do think about liking the video or following us on your chosen podcast platform. We really appreciate your support, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye.